If you think you've already seen the strongest species in the galaxy, if you believe advanced technology and massive fleets decide who wins wars, then stay with me, because what you're about to hear will prove something far more terrifying. Sometimes the most dangerous force in the universe is a species that refuses to lose, no matter the cost. And before we begin, if you enjoy stories where humanity shocks the galaxy, make sure to subscribe to Coming the HFY, because this is just the beginning. The skies above Charon 9 weren't supposed to burn, but they did, turning a once calm violet atmosphere into a storm of fire and falling metal as orbital strikes rained down without pause, each impact shaking the underground shelters where millions of civilians waited in silence, hoping someone, anyone, would answer their calls for help, but no one had, not in the 8 days since the invasion began. And High Envoy Terex stood in the deepest command vault beneath the surface, staring at the tactical projections that no longer displayed a battle, only a slow, methodical extermination, because that's what the Veerl Domiinion did. They didn't conquer worlds, they erased resistance until nothing remained but obedience, and Terex knew exactly what came next because he had studied their history. First the bombardment, then the atmospheric alteration, and finally the generational control that turned entire species into labor-bound shadows of what they once were. And now it was happening. To his people, the Illlyrians, their once luminous skin dulled by fear, their voices quiet, their hope thinning with every passing hour. "We've lost the southern hemisphere shelters," Commander Verel said, her voice strained, her 4 arms trembling slightly as she struggled to keep composure. Dominion tunneling units breached the last defense line. There were no survivors. And Terex didn't respond immediately because there was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said. Every ally had been contacted, every treaty invoked, every promise tested, and every one of them had failed. The coalition cited distance, the trade guilds cited neutrality, and the sovereign clusters. They had simply stopped replying altogether, because no one wanted to stand against the Dominion, not after what happened to the last species that tried. "There must be someone left," Terex whispered, more to himself than anyone else, his gaze scanning through archived contact lists, most of them outdated, many of them irrelevant, until one entry caught his attention, buried under layers of outdated classifications and flagged as unpredictable. A species that had never fully integrated into galactic politics, a species most considered too volatile to trust. Humans, the file read, Earth origin, Class 12 Death World species, minimal diplomatic engagement, extensive combat history, and Terex hesitated, because even among desperate options, this one felt different, not safer, just unknown. "You're not thinking of contacting them," Verel said, noticing the pause. "The humans don't follow standard doctrine, their war records are chaotic, their casualty tolerance is extreme," Terex finished quietly. "Yes, I know," because he had read the same reports, seen the same data, human fleets that fought beyond logical limits, soldiers who kept moving after injuries that should have ended them, strategies that ignored conventional survival metrics entirely. They didn't fight like other species, they fought like they had something to prove to the universe itself. "That's exactly why we call them," he said finally, activating the long-range communicator, because at this point, predictable allies had already failed, and maybe what they needed wasn't stability. Maybe what they needed was something the Dominion couldn't anticipate. The connection took longer than expected, stretching into minutes that felt like hours as the bunker shook again from another impact above, dust falling from the ceiling, alarms flickering, until finally the screen came to life, revealing a human, older, with sharp eyes and a calm expression that didn't match the chaos Terex expected. "This is Fleet Admiral Jonathan Hayes of the Terran Defense Network," the man said, his voice steady. "You're transmitting from a war zone, identify yourself," and Terex stepped forward, forcing strength into his posture despite everything. "I am High Envoy Terex of Illyria. Our world is under full-scale assault by the Veerl Domiinion. Our defenses have collapsed. Our population is at risk of extinction or enslavement. We are requesting immediate assistance." There was a brief silence. Not dismissive, not uninterested, just measured, as if the human was processing far more than he showed. "Distance?" Hayes asked. 42 light years, Terex replied, expecting hesitation, calculations, excuses, but instead the human nodded slightly. "Understood," he said, then turned off screen, speaking to someone Terex couldn't see. "Confirm Dominion fleet size, a voice responded faintly. Approximately 180 capital ships, heavy bombardment configuration. Hayes looked back at the screen, and for the first time, there was a hint of something in his expression. Not fear, not doubt. Something colder. Envoy Terex, he said. You understand what you're asking, right? We don't do half measures, Terex swallowed. We're asking you to help us survive, he said, and the human leaned back slightly, studying him. Good, Hayes replied. Because we're not coming to help, we're coming to end it. And before Terex could respond, the transmission cut, leaving the bunker in stunned silence. What does that mean? Verel asked quietly, and Terex didn't have an answer, but for the first time since the invasion began, he felt something shift, something dangerous. And 17 hours later, every sensor in the Karen system lit up simultaneously as space itself seemed to tear open, not like standard FTL entry, but something far more violent, a rupture that screamed across every frequency. And from that rupture emerged a ship so massive it redefined scale. Nearly 3 kilometers of armored hull, layered in weapons. Its silhouette brutal and unapologetic, nothing like the sleek designs favored by most species. This was a fortress, a weapon given form, and it didn't arrive quietly, it arrived like a declaration, and before the Dominion fleet could even react, hundreds of smaller craft launched from its surface, moving with terrifying precision as they spread across the battlefield, and then the firing began, not beams, not projectiles in any familiar sense, but something else, something that ignored shields. Entirely, Dominion ships disappearing mid-formation as if erased from reality, their defenses useless, their formations collapsing within minutes, and on the bridge of that colossal vessel, Admiral Hayes stood with the same calm expression, watching the destruction unfold as if it were routine. Target atmospheric processors first, he ordered, no survivors on primary weapons platforms. And his officers moved without hesitation, because for them, this wasn't chaos, it was execution. Back in the bunker, Terex watched in disbelief as the impossible unfolded. The Dominion fleet, unstoppable just hours ago, was breaking apart under an assault they couldn't comprehend. They're not just fighting, Verel whispered, they're dismantling them. And she was right. Every move precise, every strike deliberate, as if the humans had already won this battle before they arrived, and within less than an hour, it was over. The remaining Dominion ships retreating in disarray, their once perfect formation shattered beyond recovery, and as silence returned to the system, broken only by drifting debris and distant engine trails, the massive human warship settled into orbit above Karen 9 like a silent guardian, and the communication channel reopened. Admiral Hayes appearing once more. Envoy Terex, he said. Your world is secure for now. Terex struggled to find words. You destroyed them. He managed, and Hayes shook his head slightly. No, he replied. We sent a message. He paused, then added, they'll understand it. And Terex realized then what made humanity different. It wasn't just their technology, or their tactics, it was their mindset. They didn't fight to survive. They fought to ensure no one would ever try again, and as the transmission ended, Terex looked up at the sky, now clear for the first time in days, and understood something the rest of the galaxy had yet to learn. When humans finally choose to act, they don't just change the outcome of a war. They change the rules of the universe itself.